we are stepping on this to the second part of today's session, and I would like to welcome here Stephan Horvath, who is an amazing person, a really experienced entrepreneur with over 20 years of experience on the C-level in international companies and consulting firms. He's the founder of Ideations, a firm connecting knowledge, investor relations, and advising tech clients and tech funds on business and innovation strategies. So, Stephan, welcome here. The stage is yours.
Hello, and thank you for having me here, especially for having us all here in the panel today. First of all, thank you very much for you, the team, and also for everyone out listening today to the panel. It is a very good initiative. It is a very good format, and I think also very creative. And today it's about Germany, and which I love most, because I'm born and raised in Germany. I worked about 20 years abroad in 6 continents, and COVID brought me back home. And yeah, now I'm here, and we are talking today about community partners, how to find the best partners for your hypergrowth. Hypergrowth is a big word, and let's say hypergrowth is about a growth industry, artificial intelligence, AIoT, maybe communications, mobility, but also it has to meet growth markets like impact investment, like the fighting of climate change. Everybody is telling us forbidden is not good, but define new technologies, develop new ideas that helps the humanity to fight that. So I think there's a lot of chances for European and especially German startups, where the German government also helps to support areas in renewable energies, hydrogen, and all that stuff. And that is what we want to discuss today with the panel. Yeah, what are the growth industries in Germany, and how is Germany suited to build that? We have today in the panel, it was about finding the right industries and also finding the right partners. And the right partners, I think we have here on our panel. Let me just introduce very quickly the names, and then everybody can give an own introduction. Jessica Espinoza, she's Vice President, Investment, Private Equity and Venture Capital of DEG, which is a very important company in Germany when it comes to finding entrepreneurship. And she's also co-chair of 2X Collaborative. We have here Björn Holster, Knowledge Through Research, Lim Analytics Partners, and also the managing partners of the Technology Institute in Frankfurt. Ashish Kumar Mittal from Open Finance Technology. He's Vice President of Bank Open, and he brings innovation and experience from Asia to China. Ruth Cremer, expert in business modeling, startup financing, and what I really loved when I saw that was that she worked on Dragon's Den, or a coach for the startup industry, which makes me very, very interested about that part of the speech. And I can't see at the moment Zoltan. So I think we have then the team ready, and I will hand over. Maybe Ruth, would you like to start to introduce yourself and how you are connected to the German startup industry ecosystem, please?
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. I think you said already a lot. So I originally studied mathematics, and so that's basically where my numbers for where my passion for numbers, KPIs, and such comes from. I worked as an investment manager, and then went back to my own business. Basically as a consultant, and that's what I'm doing now. So I help mostly startups to prepare for investors. That is kind of my core business, among others for the German version of the TV show Dragon's Den or Shark Tank. I'm doing this since 4.5 years, something like that. So I've prepared like 500 startups around for that show already, but actually I do a quite similar job with my usual clients because it's basically not always the same questions that investors have, but it's quite similar issues. And sometimes I also work with investors or in M&A projects, analyzing business models, going deeper into the number crunching stuff and things like that. I have some side projects, some startups. One I'm invested in. I teach at university. So I'm writing a book currently. So some side hustles as well, but still mainly working with startups to prepare them for investors.
Wow, that's really awesome. Jessica, would you give a short introduction, and may I ask you to talk a bit about the gender lens investing, because that is what I found at your profile that looked to me very, very appealing, and I think it's absolutely in that what you call in German Zeitgeist. So I think it goes right in the direction. So please.
Hi, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here today. So as Stephan already mentioned, I'm kind of wearing two hats. I'm Vice President for Venture Capital and Private Equity Investments at DG. DG invests in emerging markets. So we don't invest directly in German startups or in German companies. But every time a German company expands to global markets and to emerging markets, we're a partner to take them on this international journey. And I think particularly pertinent to today's discussion about hyper growth in venture capital in particular, but also private equity, what we see is that whenever we have business models that are tech-enabled, that have hyper growth potential, they are often global, or I would say almost always global models. So the boundaries between developed markets, emerging markets is very blurred, and that also opens up exciting opportunities for DG. Furthermore, we of course also part of the KfW group, plays a big role in financing German startups with KfW Capital, and so also there are interesting synergies and opportunities for collaboration. Then my second role, as Stephan, you mentioned, is co-chair of the TREX Collaborative. The TREX Collaborative is an industry body for gender lens investing. It's global and convenes the entire spectrum of investors in a global industry body. So those are the development finance institutions like DG from all over the world, also like the IFC, that I'm sure many of you know, as well as private equity funds, venture capital funds, pension funds who are LPs in funds, and basically all other types of asset managers and financial institutions. And the purpose is to apply a gender lens to the way we invest, so really to our core business. And we launched in 2018 at the G7 Summit, we launched a 2X Challenge, which was at the time committed to mobilize at least $3 billion of investments that have a gender lens. What does that mean? It means investing, overcoming gender bias in capital allocation, investing in female founders who we know receive still only 2% of venture capital, which is really ridiculous if you look at the potential and the opportunity market. So looking at female founders, but also of companies that are founded by men, but that, for example, make an effort to have diversity and inclusion policies and practices, that have women in leadership positions, women in the workforce, and that also address the women's market on the consumer side. So that look at women's needs, kind of products that have a gender lens. And the 3 billion target was significantly overachieved. We mobilized more than 11 billion in less than 3 years, which really showed the business case. That, as I mentioned, was at an international level, but very interestingly, we received a lot of interest initially from Switzerland and from Swiss investors, but now also increasingly from Germany. And I think this is really a major future trend that will also be decisive in the way we allocate capital. Here, I have a lot of other stuff to share, but I don't want to talk too long.
Okay, thank you. So it's really awesome, and I think it's very, very comprehensive, and definitely we will have questions about that later. Let me hand over now to Björn. Björn is the partner from Liminalytics and also the managing partner of Technology Institute. He's from Frankfurt. And please, would you just give an overview about what you do for the German startup ecosystem?
Yeah, thanks, Stefan. Yeah, so my background is a little different. Actually, I'm an engineer, a mechanical engineer. Worked in the finance industry for 20 years as a partner in the family office for UBS, as an investment banker in capital markets for Deutsche, as a business developer in the Middle Eastern region, working with the state funds. And then I decided I need to do something which is actually really challenging. So I decided to become an entrepreneur and found a startup, which was the first one was Technology Institute, because I wanted to learn something new every day, right? And once I started learning and getting back into coding, which I had done during my studies, I really learned that I didn't know anything. So my learning curve is still very steep now, 3 years in. And what we have done there as a major project is Liminalytics, which is a new word we created actually from liminality and analytics. Liminality is the analysis of passages between states. In this case, it's the passage between the carbon economy and the zero carbon economy. And analytics, obviously, we analyze the risks that go along with that. And the special setup we have there is we work together with a development partner, which is the bank. In our case, it's GLS Bank. Very high ambition level in terms of sustainable finance. And why do we do this? Because we've identified sustainability and regulatory environment in Germany as a big area. But we also know that this is so complicated, and I think the previous panel, Henrik mentioned it before, especially in Germany, if you are not firm on the regulatory side, seek a partner is exactly what we did. And we developed this model together with them so we can have it ready once the regulator makes it mandatory, which is expected next year, that every bank has to calculate their credit value at risk from climate risk, which sounds easy, but I'm sure, Ruth, you're a mathematician, you know that's quite complicated to do when all of the data that you have is qualitative, and then you have to produce some kind of quantitative output. So quite interesting, and for me personally, extremely challenging because of the very steep learning curve, both on the content side and on the programming side.
Right. Thank you. And last, Ashish, would you please share, because I have seen in your profile you worked on 3 continents, right? And we are now in Germany. So what brought you back to Germany, or what brought you to Germany? And how can we learn from this journey for the German ecosystem?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think from my side, I was a past software engineer, about 15, 16 years back, who did engineering in computer science and was working as a software developer for many years before, actually started working for money. But then very soon realized that, the niche of, or the value of software development is not about, how difficult the algorithms are, but how much value it brings to the users and how much value it brings to the business and the consumers. And which is the area which I kind of lacked. So I went back to school to learn that, did my master's in business, and then went to Bank of New York Mellon Corporation, where I, spent the next 4 years building wealth management technology. It was more like, robo-advisory minus 1.0, where under the hood, everything was completely automatic. But, for the end consumer, there was still an advisor, sitting and, kind of helping out the end investor. In 2011, I accidentally kind of bumped into the CTO of one of the fastest growing Indian startup in a very small town near New York, and coincidentally, just for half a day spent over there, I ended up coming back to India to work for Flipkart. Spent about 6 years over there. In those 6 years, of course, Flipkart went from a 200 people company to a 25,000 people company. From a valuation of few $100 million to $27 billion. It's already around 40 billion right now. So, as you can imagine, if you see that scale of 200 to 25,000 people, I've kind of done it all, right? In the startup, you have to kind of do everything that is kind of required. And at that point in time, somewhere in 2018, there were a lot of circumstances being changed on my personal side, and I was more looking to actually go back to US, to be honest. But one of my ex-colleague at Flipkart, who was in Germany, somehow kind of got me here, and I'm really happy that it did, because when I kind of was coming here, I felt Germany would be quite closer to the Western world, which in my mind was US at that point in time. But I think it's very, very different, and I'm really happy to kind of get that experience. Over the last 3 years, I've obviously worked for Zalando as head of product and N26, and right now I'm leading international charter for Open Bank. And what I'm doing is a little bit opposite to what Jessica, you are kind of your area is. So you are kind of looking for companies, German companies, who are kind of expanding outward. We are an outer company who is kind of trying to establish or set up an office here for European expansion. So we want to be a European bank for businesses, small and medium-sized businesses. And right now we are exploring, or actually, kind of working with a lot of partners, potential partners, to tackle some of the things that Bjorn, you said about regulatory. So we are definitely finding the right partners over there, and the ecosystem is really amazing. I think what I can definitely talk about in today's session, maybe in some time, is how I see the ecosystem of these three continents, and what is really special about Germany. It's definitely very close to my heart.
I think I write down the question and I will come back. But just what I want to say is, you said something very, very important. You said you're doing the opposite of what Jessica is doing, right? But that is the beauty of that panel from here, from Startup Disrupt, and how we brought it together. Because as an entrepreneur, you don't have just one path. You have so many options. Some of them look from outside inwards, the other look from inside outwards. And one or more on the commercial side, like we have seen with Ruth, what she said before. Others are highly on the technology side, like Björn lighted out, right? And I think what I would go in the second round to Ruth, and I'm really sorry for asking, but this Höhle des Löwen, or Dragon's Den, is so, or what you also do with pitch consulting, not only there, but somewhere else, right? Is, can you share some experience how that helps actually a German startup to get prepared to walk through investors? Because Jessica is on the investment side. She want to see a perfect pitch, right? So at least a perfect pitch would makes it way easier to come in. And Ruth is on the side that helps a startup that has maybe a fantastic idea, but not the true plan, how she brings the data to, how they have to bring the data together and walk there onwards. So Ruth, can you share some experience around that, or share some what a startup has to look at to do that, how you prepare them? Just a few hints.
So the question is about what we actually do with the pitch training, right?
The question is about, when I'm a startup, how can you help a startup to pitch perfect?
Well, how?
So it's your work.
By knowledge, how by knowledge and experience. So because and it helps a lot that I have been on the investor side, so I know what investors are looking for, at least in my former area. So as I said, I'm a mathematician from study, so I worked in the software area. So from what I've seen now, actually I think I can now say, after almost 5 years of the German Dragon's Den, I've worked in every kind of industry, because it's basically everything. It's tech, it's sometimes super high tech, it's sometimes tomato sauces. I don't know. It's basically everything, which was really a challenge for me, coming just from the software side. So. But I was super surprised, realizing after several months, or maybe after the first year, that actually it is everything. Well, they have something in common. And for example, when I do with other clients, when I prepare them for investors, a lot of times what I 80% do is talking to them or with them about their business model and trying to get that right to investors, because we have maybe the others have another point of view. I'm a bit provocative here, but I think in Germany we have a very bad pitching culture, I would say, in terms of education and knowledge behind that, because a lot of times when I'm on pitch events, I'm listening to, if they have like 5 minutes pitch, I'm listening to 3.5 minutes product presentation. And if I'm lucky, they say what their pricing model is. Yeah, if I'm very lucky. So a lot of times it's not even there, the business model, but this is the most important thing for investors. So really the not the core of my work, but one of the things I really work with them on is how to present their business model, how to find out what their most important KPIs actually are for their business model, how to present them, how to evaluate if the KPIs they have so far, especially if they're already on the market, are good or are bad. How to present that, how to say where they want to improve, how to argue they're not so good KPIs, how to push the good KPIs, and so on. So basically presenting their business models in a way that it is believable that you can at least at some point make money with it. And for the rest, I'm mostly I like to call myself a content coach. So I don't do presentation modes, or I don't do how to talk or how to move your hands or whatever. Actually, I would be a bad example, because as you see, I'm moving my hands all the time when I'm talking. So I don't do this presentation coaching. I do content coaching, and I tell them what investors want to hear. But sometimes I also do a little bit of, especially with the Dragon's Den, I had to learn a little bit about how to say that. Yeah, for example, I see it a lot of times that especially female founders are not that convincing, or not convinced about themselves, which I think is super sad. So I also had to learn to push people and say, hey, believe in yourself, you can do that, and stuff like that, and tell them actually what is good about their business model, and also to hold, I have to say, mostly the male founders a little bit back, and don't be too over
present.
Over present, or have too much self-esteem, have too much are too much convinced about themselves, and which especially comes out in terms of evaluations. But that's another point of my work. Yeah,
right. But I think a very, very important takeaway from what you said now is that startups are pretty much focused on their idea or their business or their product, that they are not so much thinking about what an investor want to hear. Maybe at the end, they even forget not only the business model, but also what is in for them, right?
That's clearly my experience, yeah.
Yeah, and that it's important because a lot of startups will look and they want to disrupt the world. Yeah, so I think it's important that they have coaches like you who help them to be able on that path, to work that path. Yeah, and then to go to, and now let me switch over to Jessica. Then to go to someone like Jessica and present, right? But I think then on that level it is already higher, because DEG is looking for the larger tickets, I assume. When you say you go online, and there's one thing that is in my mind, because I worked 1 or 2 years ago on a study for Europe, where a lot of European startups, even if they get funded in the first round, seed, Series A and Series B, then they struggle latest at Series C to get funded in Europe. Yeah, so a way of their exit was, I go to the US, because if the idea is super cool, then the money is there. But for Europe, for Germany, for our ecosystem, it's actually not a good thing, because if Silicon Valley grabs once an idea, yeah, the chances that in a disruptive space, let's say the technology or whatever makes it over the Atlantic, yeah, is very high, right? So DEG, how is DEG helping European startups to stay in Europe and probably also to expand their European business? Are there some cases you can talk about, or a structure that they have to follow?
So to that particular question, so DEG invests in, we have different types of products. Our sweet spot is, as you mentioned, larger ticket sizes. So like in the kind of core commercial business, the minimum ticket would be 5 million of direct investments. Sweet spot is more like 10 to 50 million, and then like all the way up. However, we do invest in VC funds that do also smaller tickets. And then we can also come in as a co-investor. So we have more flexibility there. And in addition, we have a number of specific, like more promotional programs, more for early growth, that are also much smaller tickets. So that can also be under 1 million. We at DG, our use of funds has to be for emerging markets, which makes it a little bit complicated. So it's more like going into emerging markets or having some R&D, or, you know, like the famous developers that are in Ukraine. That would be a great example of what we could finance. And KfW is more part of our group that focus on actually investments in the European Union or in Germany specifically. So they would come in there and provide that. To your other point about the different rounds, my greatest feedback, in addition to what Ruth mentioned, I can only echo that, the focus on the product and not really taking the side of the investor, or really understanding, what is, like the famous example, what is an exit? What are you talking about? Why would you want to get out of my awesome company after 7 years? That is kind of a classic example. But also, often when startups come, or any companies, also Series A, B, C, when they come to us, they're usually desperate for money. So they're on this growth journey. They need new cash, and so they come and they're desperate. And that is often leads to quite bad decision on the founder side, where they get diluted too fast, or where they are not strategic about who they bring on board. They just want the money. And we always work with the entrepreneurs to really encourage them to think about it strategically. Think about, your seed stage, your and then to Series A, and then B, C, etc., to all of the rounds. Think about the ratio of dilution that is acceptable to you, and also what that means in terms of the valuation that you need in each round. And also think about the types of investors that you're targeting. Because what is interesting, what I don't hear so much in the US or in other countries, but what I often hear from German entrepreneurs is that they say, I don't want an accelerator because they take an equity stake. I prefer, any non-dilution capital. And they would rather take money, for example, from a rich uncle who is risk averse, has absolutely no interest in taking startup risk, but they would rather take not smart money, just any kind of money that where they don't have to give up stake, but that can't add any value to them. And an accelerator, especially if you think about the famous example from Silicon Valley, Y Combinator, but also in Germany, we have Techstars, we have others. If you think about those and the kind of network they bring, the reputation, the branding, that is kind of the smart capital that you would want. Or if you think about VCs, in Germany, we have Early Bird, and just kind of the opportunities that such an investor can open up. It's better to give up a little bit more stake or to have an equity investor than having money that's not bringing any value add, and that will definitely not help you get to hyper growth or to an IPO.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. And I think it's the next learning. Yeah, it's not only strategically preparing the pitch, right? But what you said before and looking at the KPIs, it is also strategically planning ahead your funding rounds from C to Series A to Series B to Series C, right? Because that is where very often they struggle. And I work together with a few VCs from Silicon Valley, and I know that for them, European companies who are distressed in funding rounds are seen as an easier prey than probably well-funded US companies, right? So I think that's a very important hint, and I think it's also for a startup important to plan that ahead, with a CFO or with partners like DG, KfW or others, right? To have their a straight route. And may I just move on now to Björn, because before we're running out of time. So where do you see, Björn, the opportunities for startups in Germany? And you mentioned before a topic like sustainability or RegTech space. Where do you see there the opportunity?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I mean, before I start, let me say I agree with Ruth and Jessica said. It was very important to have that plan, and within that plan, I think it's also good to be situated in some kind of a mega trend, right? And we all know sustainability is one of those trends, and there's a lot of hot air produced around that, and there are many companies out there calculating your CO2 footprint. Unfortunately, which is also a topic in the earlier session, right? The level of education in Germany is so terrible that people will just take that number and will not ask where the data comes from and what does it actually signify? What does it mean, right? What data did you use? Is this actually a number that you can use in further calculations? Is it correct? How big are the errors? If you look at the scenarios that are calculated, for example, we have Friederike Otto from the climate side from Oxford University on the board, right? If you look on the errors that go in NGFS climate scenarios, for example, predictions of carbon price for the next years, it's between 50 and 5,000 euros per ton. So, I mean, this bar is so immensely huge, and then people do a calculation, say your carbon footprint is 5 tons. But what does 5 tons carbon footprint mean? Depends on the carbon price, right? If this is 50, it's not a whole lot, right? If it's 5,000, it's a lot of money. So we really try to ask what is the quality of the data that goes into calculations, and what actually can you do with this data? This is also a discussion that we have with the regulators, both on the European level and on the German level. One of our founding partners with the DNB in the Netherlands. How can you ask as a regulator banks to make calculations and not provide the data or the formula to do it with? So this goes hand in hand. The good thing is nobody knows how to do it, so we're all in this boat together. Maybe we're on our side a little bit science heavy, because we have the quantum physicist and mechanical engineer and the mathematician, and we need probably more marketing and people who can translate it into something that somebody can understand. But I feel like sustainability, and especially a combination with the regulatory space, which, like we heard, it seems to be a big topic, especially in Germany, and I think in Europe as well. This is something where we could also spend some time educating the younger generation. And the founders that we all 20 years plus of industry experience. And I teach as well at Frankfurt School and at Arcades, which is a small university in Bad Homburg. And if you see the level of education there, even in the master classes, it's really frightening. So people do not know how to use the simplest programming techniques. They do not know how to do the simplest interest calculations, and that's not as coming out of school. It's on master level. So how can you do with this level of education? How can you set up a company? And I think Henrik said it before in the previous panel. It is really something where everybody with a little experience needs to go teach something. I think, and bring this to a better standard, because it's what they actually should learn in school. And that's what we're about. And when we have that, then it's easy to have the cool startups where people actually know what their business model is and how they will bring it forward, and then everything else falls in place accordingly. So this is my challenge to everybody with experience: go out there and teach on the side. It's fun, and it helps us all makes Europe a better place for the entire startup community.
Right. Thank you. And I think that is also what Startup Disrupt is doing. We have seen at the beginning in the first panel good startups, and they add in that format in the second panel the partners, right? And since, as you said, there are some deficits in different ways, for some more in the mathematical or in the numbers or in the finance areas, it is so important that the startup ecosystem in Germany gets bolstered, by valuable partners who could help them to overcome the gaps, to make it a smooth experience for their startup. So, and I think that is what makes the startup system, I think, in such areas very, very reliable if you work together with partners, who understand the local market, who work together, and then who move on. So I really like that summary. Thank you so much. And Ashish, maybe you can tell me something about what you think in the question you raised before about what is the impact for the German ecosystem? What can you bring in? What we can learn from outside? Would you share this experience with us?
Absolutely. And I think there are some similarities between the startup ecosystem everywhere in the world, including Germany, but there are also quite a few differences. So I think on the positive side, I definitely feel that Germany, a general mindset of strategic thinking and planning ahead is very, very strong, and it kind of gives a very strong foundation in a lot of ways. Similarly, I think while fully agree with Bjorn around the education needs, especially around carbon footprinting, etc. But I also do find that the broader level of people who are involved in startups have a very constant zeal of learning. So the average number of years that Germans spent in education is already more, and then on top of it, the companies and individuals are ready to kind of invest a lot more on continuous education, which is quite heartening, and not very commonly seen everywhere in the world. And what this kind of leads to is basically a challenging environment where your peers and your colleagues give you challenge you in every aspect of things that you're kind of doing or you want to do, and which keeps you honest and keeps you on the right track. At the same time, I do feel that the risk appetite of taking drastic decisions, and sometimes you have data to kind of get to the right decision making. Sometimes you do not. Taking that leap of confidence and deciding something and say, hey, it's okay, we'll fail, but we'll kind of move on. I think that's something I would definitely encourage more in the ecosystem here. Similarly, around the focus of speed versus profitability, or growth versus profitability is another area which I believe strongly that Berlin could benefit, or Germany could largely benefit if some of these startup traits are very heavily kind of done. The only thing which I kind of add over here, and it's a commonly accepted phenomena across leaders in the startup ecosystem, is that this risk averseness, or this intolerance to failure is coming from the investors. I'm not too sure about that. So I feel that it's a catch-22 kind of a situation, or it's a chicken and egg story. I feel that broadly people are less keen to take risk. Think about it, from a one employee to take risk in kind of doing something completely different outside of their area, or Jessica was talking about taking investment with some dilution, and the founders are like really scared about diluting, or actually it's not even diluting, but ESOPs, the kind of ESOPs that you get, let's say, in India or in US is very different. So someone who would have like that kind of an exposure would see that as a big trade. So I feel very strongly that it's not just driven by the investors. I think the investors are unduly blamed, maybe partially unduly blamed, but I think the founders and the senior employees are also need to have a lot more risk appetite, a lot more eagerness to grow, eagerness to kind of fail and let their teams kind of fail. So I think those are some of the nuances that I've kind of noticed in my 3.5, 4 years here.
Thank you. Thanks. I think it's a great summary. I think we are already at 8:01, and I have a red flashing light from the organizers, because they didn't say it, but we are here in Germany, so we are not Thomas Gottschalk, because that is the only guy in Europe or in the German TV who can overdraw any TV session as long as he wants. We are a bit limited, So I was asking for the last closing statement. I just want to, before I say that, I want to say a big thank you. And it was an honor to have such esteemed speakers with me today here in this panel. Thank you so much for your contribution. And let me give you the opportunity for one last sentence or statement which you want to give to our startups who are listening today. Maybe Ruth, if you want to start, or
Why does it always have to be me? Oh, one statement.
because you're the next on the flow. So. Sorry, on the screen you were the next. Ladies first.
Statement. Yeah, then it's ladies first. Yeah, that's actually a typical German thing. When it's the thing that nobody wants to do first, then it's ladies first. But
Ruth,
without the other
want,
things,
we can do it the other way around, and we start with Ashish.
Actually, I always say with such a thing, I always get a little bit cheesy and definitely say. Despite all the other things, and it's all right, and I always say focus on your numbers and be more analytic and so on, but at some point it's really follow your heart, because I think it's super important that you with all the education you need and all the knowledge and all the strategy and numbers and KPIs and analytics and whatever, it's super important that you are super convinced about it, because we just talked about how difficult it is and how the mindset still is actually not in favor of founders. So it's super important to believe in what you do and to really have your heart in it. And these are the founders I'm super happy to work with each and every time. So I hope we will see more of them.
Thank you. Jessica, maybe can I hand over to you?
Yes, happy to go next. I would say, whatever you want as a startup is fine. But if you want hyper growth, which is the topic of this panel, you have to take smart risks. And don't be afraid to ask for help. Bring on board all the support that you need. Establish an advisory board. Ask the top people. Don't be afraid to ask the big guys or girls. And just get the support you need, and then just trust that you can, make it happen and take those calculated risks.
Thank you. Awesome. Björn, please.
Yeah, a little bit in the same direction, right? So everybody thinking about starting a company, just go ahead and do it, right? So and take this I can fail attitude and learn from your mistakes, right? So I keep a list which is not the to-do list, but I have done list. So I put everything I've done on that list. It's a great list, makes me very happy. I look at it. And I've failed, that's also a good thing to do. And don't be afraid to reach out, comparing my sales career 20 years to entrepreneur career. If you're sales, nobody wants to talk to you, right? Because you're getting on their nerves. But if you're an entrepreneur, don't be afraid to reach out. Most of the people are happy to speak to you, and then you can network and learn from each other. So just do it. Don't hesitate.
Yeah, and then Ashish, please.
Absolutely, I fully agree with Björn. I think one of the beauty of being in Berlin or being in Germany is, even though sometimes people may feel a little dry, but everyone is very keen, in the heart to help. You approach anyone, it's a very strong and very collaborative ecosystem of sorts. And I think, irrespective of how we kind of have some small things about the risk appetite and some of those things not working in the favor, I think by and large, Berlin in Germany is really amazing to start a pan-European company. I'm kind of building a business neobank, and I have pretty much every partner for every single area. Even if there are some things which I already have in my house, I'm kind of thinking about leveraging that. So the kind of ecosystem that's there in Germany is amazing. The ease of doing business is really good. So with all the German bureaucracy talk about, but the faults that you see over there is very minimal. So I have to give that to the German government, that they have really done some things right over there. But really, apart from all of these, which are measurable things, I think the real value of starting up in Berlin or Germany comes from the openness that people have. So everyone is open to kind of listen to each other, and everyone is open to kind of understand others' perspective. the freedom that you have. So the freedom that each one of us have in terms of our thoughts, and freedom is not just limited to your mobility or what you are saying or what you are kind of imposing on others, but yourself. Like everyone is so free to think and do anything that they feel like. And just the multicultural or cosmopolitan crowd that we have. So diversity, openness, and freedom are really, really amazing, and this kind of makes the companies naturally innovative, structurally strategic, and ridiculously meticulous. So I think this is the perfect blend of a startup, in my opinion, and Berlin and Germany are really amazing to kind of provide that culture and space for startups to be able to create pan-European companies.
Okay, thank you so much for your closing words. We will hand now back to the startup competition that starts now, and I'm sure we wish them all not only growth, but definitely hyper growth. And now we hand over back to Patrick. Thanks.
So once more, thank you all of you guys for your amazing contribution from the previous panel. Thank you, Stephan, for amazing moderation. And right now we are stepping into the next phase of today's session.